The beauty of art is that it has that interpretive function. You can look at it from one perspective and say, wow, that's really impressive. And another person might just say, that's just absolute trash. And I think that's also really interesting that people have those perspectives and they can share that. And yeah, I mean, again, I've experimented a lot in the past, and I've had some very, very interesting results. And I think just through music by itself, I've learned a huge amount about human psychology and how people work. And it's I don't think I would change it for the world.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edit Undo podcast. This is the first time that we're recording at night, so I guess that's a first in some aspects, but I think we're on episode 15 now. I'm keen for this chat. We are talking Web3, we are talking music, we are talking creativity. I think we're going to have a great discussion today. Our guest has played in each one of those spaces. And I think, this is one of those guests where you almost can't do an introduction because you'd end up speaking for the longest of times. So we'll sort of leave that in his side of the court. But Brynn, it is an honor and I think also a pleasure to be chatting with you today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate being here. Thanks, Alfie. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. I've known you all about, I think, 11 minutes, and it's already been quite an interesting introduction conversation. So, Alfie is totally right. I think this is going to be an interesting one, a broad array of topics, but we're going to see how we can make some of these topics a little bit more accessible to the creative minds out there, especially seeing as they topics that can be very technical heavy. And yeah, I think we're going to pull some of that practical knowledge out of you.
Definitely.
Okay. Sounds like fun. Sounds like a plan. Let's get to it.
But I think also something else that's exciting. This is another, well, not a first, a second, I guess. But we also have James on the show live with us today. So I think that's also pretty cool. Every now, James is usually in the background kind of making all of the technical things happen, but he's going to be joining us in the conversation today. So I'm also super excited for that.
Especially because this is a special one, seeing as James knows you very well, and that's kind of how we got to meet you.
Yeah, that would be the illustrious James Turner. Yes, I am very, very well aware of his existence. And we've had many a conversation in the past, so it's good to see him again, and it's great to meet you guys. And it's just a sublime feeling being here. Really,
we really appreciate that. But let's dive into it. We're going to talk about NFTs and we're going to talk about all of that. But let's start with your almost like your creative roots. So if we kind of turn the clock back a couple of years, I think some odd 20 or so years. Do you mind giving us an idea of how a person who is currently in the NFT Web 3.0 space starts off in music? How did that happen?
Didn't exist.
Yeah, back then.
Well, that's a whole nother story. I'll have to get to how that really happened. It's not like it just was brewing since then. I didn't really have any awareness of any of this stuff. I had no concept of cryptocurrency or blockchain technology or anything like that until about middle 2017 or even pretty late 2017. So when my dad told me about Ethereum and Bitcoin, and he's like, "Are you going to buy some?" I'm like, "I don't even know what that is." So that was kind of the beginning of my journey for crypto. But in terms of my creative journey, that's a bit of a weird one. I guess if we're going to talk about music, when I was younger, when I was a kid, I didn't really have any particular taste or even really love for music, as it were. I think my sister took us to a couple of drum lessons with a guy who used to be in a band called Fruit Fly Navigators. I think the guy's name was Gareth, and I think I was about 10 or 11 years old. We only went for a couple of lessons, and I remember very, very little bits of it, but it was somewhere in sort of the Glenwood area in Durban. And that never really turned into anything. And then years later, in about, it was beginning of grade 9, I remember at Westville Boys High, where I was educated. Some of my friends were talking, and one of them said, he got a guitar, and my other friend, he got a bass. And they were like, "Oh, dude, you should totally get a guitar, and we should form a band." And I was like, "Huh? What? Get it? That's a really weird idea." I was like, "Well, I don't know, man. Like that's pretty strange. Like I don't know why you would say that." Like, and then I kind of remember being at home at some point after this conversation, and I was kind of sitting by the dinner table or something, and I just said to my dad, I said to him, the guys at school, Stuart and Dane, they say that they want to start a band, and I should get a guitar and start learning. And he's like, "That's a great idea. We're gonna get a guitar together, you and I, and we're gonna learn it, and you're gonna be the custodian of the guitar, and we'll both take lessons, and it'll be great." And I was just like, "Whoa, okay, that escalated quickly." And then I ended up going down to Clean's Music in central Durban and getting a Yamaha acoustic with a pickup, which I still actually have, incidentally. My first guitar, I still own it. And yeah, that's pretty much where the journey began for me. And I started attending lessons. But my teachers were great guys, but they kind of wanted to keep teaching me more like hymns and stuff like that, and stuff with bar chords, which I absolutely despise still to this day. I don't like bar chords. I can play them if I have to, but it hurts the fingers and stuff. And it was just like, I wanted to learn Nirvana and Metallica and all that stuff that that kids who don't do sports like, and pretty much I just never really got to that. So I kind of just was like, I said to my mom, "Look, I'll just go on my own until I find a teacher." And I never really found a teacher, so I used to just kind of go through old magazines and Guitar Worlds and Ultimate Guitar stuff, and I would just try and write my own tabs and write my own songs, and I made a whole bunch of mistakes, broke strings, tried to develop technique, which was kind of more like me just slamming the guitar as hard as I could with my right hand. And then, my friends being like, "Wow, that's very aggressive. Like, is that kind of the stuff you want to do?" I'm like, I don't know. Sounds kind of cool to me. And yeah, that was pretty much how it all started off. And then I ended up getting into a fusion band in high school with a Belgian guy named Bert. And then with a couple other, because before then I couldn't find a drummer, I couldn't find other musicians. Nobody wanted to play Metallica or Slayer or that kind of stuff. They're like, "What is this music?" It's like, "Are you out of your mind?" Which, that's debatable. But anyway, we got into this like fusion alternative cover band thing. And we that was quite fun. We actually even played a few live shows at the school. We did like covers of Bush, and we did some originals and that kind of stuff. I think we had a song called Rocky Gran or something like that, which was the Belgian guy named that. That wasn't me. And the name of our band was, unofficially, it was Balle van Beton, which I'm told is balls of concrete. And I was like, "I'm sure it's supposed to be balls of steel or something like that." He's like, "No, it's Balle van Beton." I was like, "Okay, cool. We are balls of concrete." And that was pretty much my high school journey, and that then came to an end after Bert went back to Belgium and started eating waffles there. And then pretty much 2006 rolled around, and I was out of school, and I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, I want to play in a band and do some cool stuff." And I had a guitar, and then I met this guy with long dreadlocks, and he was a drummer, and I was really, really nervous, and I went to go and audition and just sort of show him that I could play some stuff with my really bad electric guitar, and I think I had like a 50-watt amp or something. It was a Marshall solid state. It was horrible when I think back to it, but that's pretty much how it started with the metal band thing. And then I started my first metal band then, which was called Code of Silence. And we eventually got some other members, and our second show was absolutely horrific. I broke a string, the other guitarist broke a string in the second song. We ended up borrowing guitars because we didn't know you had to have backup guitars. and it was an absolute, it was hellish. It was terrible. I remember just wanting to be dead and getting off the stage and hearing someone going, that band just sucked. And I was like, oh God, please just end my existence, you know. But nevertheless, we persevered, and we had a couple of good shows and stuff. And then later on, I ended up being in a band called Pledge Defiance, which used to be, which was now, this is like getting into the death metal stuff. And then I started off as a rhythm player, so I wasn't playing any lead or anything like that. And then a couple of months into the band, our vocalist actually died. He passed away from a brain embolism 2 weeks after his 21st birthday, which was super duper brutal and not expected in the slightest. But he had a congenital defect in his brain, and then he had some kind of issue when he was 4, but because it hadn't developed enough, he managed to survive that. But 21, unfortunately, had this embolism, and he ended up passing away, which was obviously devastating for myself and the band. And then after that, I actually ended up taking over on the vocal side, which was also quite daunting for me, now having to try and take up to live up to Andrew's legacy. And I was like, whoa, geez. And there was a lot of ambivalence around that when I first went into that. But again, it was a worthwhile thing, and I think it was a good challenge. And then a couple of years later, that kind of petered out as well. I got into another band, which was more of a grindcore band. Played in that for a couple of years. Then in 2015 ended up playing in a band. I actually got into drumming, just because I got tired of drummers and their attitude and all that stuff. And I was just like, I'm tired of these guys, and they're lazy and they don't want to play the stuff I want to play. And so I was like, I'll just do it myself, which actually had started in the grindcore band days. And then I ended up getting into a band called The Overmind in 2015 with a couple of guys from some other bands and stuff. And that did pretty well on the international circuit, and we played a couple shows. And then after some creative differences in about 2016, I basically quit the band and stuff, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this anymore. And then I was kind of actually going to stop doing the band thing for some reason. And then a few months later, I ended up starting another project, which I'm now currently in, called Imperious Vision. And we went through a whole bunch of lineup changes and stuff, but we actually released our debut album in 2020, which I ended up producing and mastering myself. Wow. We released 2 music videos, a lyric video, and then obviously there's like live footage and stuff that's out there as well. And then also in that same year, I launched my black metal project, which is called Sorgsikken, which is sorrow sickness in Norwegian. And that's also pretty cool, but we only got the one song right now that's recorded and out there as a video. And that's pretty much like the abridged version of my wonderful music career. So I hope that wasn't too drony
No, that is
or poorly paced, but there you have it.
That's very cool. I think it's really interesting for me to speak to you because I wouldn't say metal is my cup of tea or my daily dose.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to kind of like chat to someone who that's kind of like the space that they're sort of playing in and exploring. And a question that I've had in my head for a long time, and I'm sure other people have as well, is like, when you listen to other genres, be it like, the more tame kinds of rock, the like rap, hip hop, more classical types of vocally led music. One of the key elements that the listener sort of connects with is the lyrics, the meaning behind the words, and sort of like the message that's passed through with that. And then the typical person would then sort of listen to a death metal song, and it just sounds like a bunch of instruments going off, people screaming, and like electric guitars going on at the same time, and it's like it can be a lot. And so one of the things I think I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about is like, what exactly have you, or maybe not exactly, but what is it that sort of you connect with when you are listening to, let's say, a death metal piece, or even when you're creating one? Because I guess it's hard to imagine what the creative expression is in that. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on the matter.
Oh, I've got plenty of thoughts on the matter. Thank you for asking. But the reality is that I think what I really love about metal that I just can't really get off of really with the genre is that it's just the pure power. It's the feeling of just this incredible surge of energy, which I just don't really find in other genres per se. I'm not to say that I'm not taking away from other genres or saying that there isn't skill or that they aren't they don't have their merits or that they aren't great in their own respects. But I just think I like the consummate aspect of it, that it's kind of and even just from a production perspective, just trying to get it sounding clean and coherent and just because there's just so much going on, like you said, it's consummate. It's like this thick wall of slamming sound that just hits you in the gut. And I'm just like, that is fascinating that somebody felt the way they did. They felt such a creative drive to make something like this and express an emotion or range of emotions that are just so intense and so overwhelming, and just to try and almost digest that from a sonic level, and then just to get that into your brain and to really filter it through and just go, wow, like there are people who can play this stuff, who make this stuff willingly. It's absolutely mind-blowing. It's incredible to me that there are people who just have this desire to just go, yeah, or whatever, and just this release of energy, and it's just incredible to me. And it's just the sheer range of different sounds that you can achieve and ideas, and even then, metal as a genre is very, very wide. You can cast the net super wide in that respect, and you can get stuff that's kind of more toward the rock vibe or like the doom vibe, or stuff that's just kind of ridiculous and over the top, comedic even, stuff that's industrial or just sounds. I don't know. Like I listen to a bunch of different music for different reasons. You you'll listen to a classical piece of music, and I don't know if you can really if you connect with it on an emotional level, in the sense that it's very cerebral music. It's very from a technical perspective, and just listening to it on that basis, you listen to it because you appreciate it for its the technical capacity you need to perform something like that, and to record it and to produce it, for example, or compose it. But with metal, what I like about it is that it has those aspects of, say, classical, especially a lot of the more technical stuff, but it also has a lot of the emotional weight and gravitas as well. And I just love that. I do. I love it, and I love being able to take an instrument like a guitar, plug it into an amplifier, feed in some distortion, and just get this thundering sound. And it's just like, even from when I was a teenager to now, at the age of nearly 35, it's still the same feeling. Drug addicts can't tell me that heroin or something gives them the exact same high every single time. In the sense that it's like there's that it's constantly chasing the whatever, the dragon or the white rabbit or whatever. And for me, it's like it's something that consistently delivers the same emotional response and just that sense of satisfaction that I don't think I've really discovered that anywhere else. And that's pretty much the main reason I like metal. The other reason I like metal is that it's just really dumb. It's a stupid genre. It's absurd. It's over the top. No one should ever make it. Go and make something nice that people listen to, make money, be happy, that kind of stuff. Don't do what I do. That's just stupid. And I love that. I just love how absurd and over the top it is, and that it tries to take itself seriously. And it's just like that's amazing. Yeah. That you have the conviction to make everyone go, wow, take me seriously. And I don't know, just for me, I think it's just endlessly fascinating, and I just don't think I'll ever really get off of it, per se.
Definitely.
I really like your perspective on this. It's especially, I think, for Alfie and me, who both were not really into the metal genre. It's quite enlightening to hear someone speak of it in such light. But what I do want to ask you, and Brynn, please take no offense. This is out of pure ignorance and naivety regarding this genre. How much order or planning goes into a metal piece? Or maybe it would be easier to go through what your process is, or if the band that you're currently in, like, what is the process of developing a set piece?
Well, okay. I can't really speak for other artists. Obviously, I don't know what their process is, and I'm sure everyone has their different processes. And I don't necessarily like all metal or just every single metal artist. Obviously, there's also under the proviso that some stuff is just objectively bad and has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. So yes, there is stuff that you would probably classify more as noise, or something that's just completely. It's just dissonant and it's over the top. And I think you can listen to that from a psychological perspective and maybe gain some modicum of meaning or satisfaction out of it, but it's nothing that's really sustainable. But in terms of my process, there is a tremendous amount of planning that goes into these things. It's not arbitrary. It's every single note, every single beat is planned. In terms of composition, I do a tremendous amount of composition. I can compose things in my head. I'm not saying that because I'm just trying to be like, look how cool I am, but I can. I can hear pieces in my head, and I can think about things that can interlock with them because I can play various instruments. And that's a skill I've honed over time. So if you wanted me to write a song for you right now, I could.
Wow.
I could do it right now. I would write you a full piece from scratch. No problem. And it would be good. I believe it would be good. I think it would be really good. And that's just because I take writing, I view everything that I do as writing. Everything's a composition, whether it's an essay or a study guide or a piece of documentation or art or whatever it might be. All of it is just an extension. It's the same thing. It's just on a different medium or a different channel. And for me, when I compose, I'll generally sit and I'll think about every single aspect, which I never used to do in the past, only until I started getting into the compositional aspect and sitting and actually planning stuff, looking at scale theory, looking at how bass lines will integrate with guitar lines and that kind of stuff. Everything has to fit into a certain space. So there's a tremendous amount of planning and rehearsing that goes on. And even then, it's like if I record something, a certain section, I'll record it until I am pretty much 100% satisfied with the end result. And you can ask my bandmates. I'm basically I'm anal in the extreme in that, like, it's like, nope, sorry that you were off cue by a millisecond. I strive for results. I believe that if you can get in the raw, you've got to get that raw material to sound seamless. It's got to be amazing. And then once you've got that sounding decent, then you can obviously pull it apart and you can space it out accordingly, and you can just create something that's just this thundering huge sound. Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm going for. And that's it. Like different types of metal require different approaches. You can't not everything is going to just be about the power. Some stuff is more the emotional capacity, the aspect of it, or a feeling of sorrow, or a feeling, or even comedic stuff. Like if I listen to some of my older stuff, I'll laugh because I know the story behind it. And I'm like, it's like some of the stuff that I write is just a big in-joke. And I don't really care if other people get it or not, because it's not important to me. It's not really that important. If they're like, okay, well, it sucks. It's like, okay, that's cool. Maybe you think it sucks. Maybe it does. But that's the whole idea, is that it's interpretation. That's the beauty of art, is that it has that interpretive function. You can look at it from one perspective and say, wow, that's really impressive. And another person might just say, that's just absolute trash. And I think that's also really interesting that people have those perspectives and they can share that. And yeah, I mean, again, I've experimented a lot in the past, and I've had some very, very interesting results. And I think just through music by itself, I've learned a huge amount about human psychology and how people work. And I don't think I would change it for the world.
That's very interesting. I think initially off the bat, I wouldn't have thought, at least, that so much planning goes into a metal piece, because like I said, as someone who's not very familiar with the genre, initially when you listen to it, you would think it's just a bunch of sound, and definitely I can relate 100% that it's high energy. So I wanted to ask you this. You said, or you spoke about, that's one of the things that really attracted you to this genre, was the high energy. both from creating it and both from consuming it. How on earth do you then do this on a daily basis to produce a body of work? Because it just seems exhausting as well. It almost seems like you need to be a very high energy person.
It is exhausting. It is very exhausting. It's very tiring. There's no doubt about it. I can get home after a band practice, and every part of my body will be in absolutely aching, and I'll wake up in the morning stiff, and I'll just go, and I'll lie there, and I'll just feel like, why do I do this to myself? It's like when I eat hot food, it's the same thing. I go, I'll never do that again, and then I do it anyway because I love it.
Does it?
Because I don't necessarily. I'm not going to tell people that I'm smart, okay? Because it's like I accept that I'm dumb. That's cool. It's no problem with being dumb. Just don't pretend like you're not dumb. It's okay to be dumb, because it's like, well, for me, that's how I deal with my angst and my experience of this life. It's like I think people do have things about themselves they don't necessarily like. They don't know how to deal with that. They internalize a lot of those things. They never really found an outlet for it. And I don't think that's healthy, because there are those darker aspects of yourself that if you don't really take them captive, you're bound to be ruled by them in some or other regard. And I found there's a tremendous number of people who don't have that. They don't have that way of dealing with things, or to put themselves in their energy somewhere into something constructive and meaningful. They'll turn it inwards, and they'll look at drug abuse. They'll drink excessively. They'll lash out at people around them. They'll be violent. They'll be cruel. They'll do hideous things to people. And I'm not necessarily saying I don't like to believe I would do those things or in any measure, but at the same time, that is how I deal with the things in life that I find uncomfortable. I like to basically encapsulate them into something, into a concept, or into an idea or a song, and I can go, there you go. This is that aspect, and it kind of gives it some form, and I don't necessarily think it gives it any credence or glorifies it, but for me, it's my way of just processing, psychologically dealing with processing a violent and indifferent world where let's be honest, people are not particularly nice. Life's not particularly fun. I don't really look at the world and feel a sunny feeling, a happy feeling in my heart. Like I wake up and go, "Wee, this is wonderful." That's just not the kind of guy I am. I've never been that way. But at the same time, I kind of go, if I want to be a good guy, if I want to be a smart guy, I also have to realize that I don't know everything. I do have things that I don't like about myself that I have to deal with. Otherwise, I risk hurting other people, and that's just not cool. I don't want to be that guy. And it's not to say that I do everything perfectly, but that's pretty much the way I deal with things. So
I really like what you've mentioned there. And I think, as much as I sort of said that, I don't necessarily understand metal as a genre, I think I can relate from a different aspect. And and I'll kind of like add a little bit of a story on top of it. So I think my version of metal is like hardcore rap, like some of the more like aggressive type of rap. And sometimes it's not even necessarily that the lyrics are like out of this world, but it's more like it awakens something primal in you. And normally that, like in a civilized society, that doesn't have a natural output. And so like sort of connecting with music at that level gives you a way to kind of express that. And so for me, when was it? I think 2019, a friend of mine was killed. And it was like in the middle of like the city in a pretty like nice area. And when before something like that happens to you, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a death, sometimes it's, something completely different, but some kind of trauma. Like before that, you sort of have like a rose-tinted version of the world. It's like, things can get bad, but at the end, everything will be okay. That's kind of like the mindset that you can have. And then something happens that just destroys that conception. And if you don't have a way to approach that, the aspect of yourself that gets affected when something like that happens, it ends up, as you said, like actually ruling you. It sort of brings you into this space where you're almost being controlled by a darker side of yourself. But when you actually listen to these kinds of music, be it, and it's also not necessarily just music, but when you sort of have a way to tap into that darker side of yourself in a controlled environment that isn't dangerous, you sort of have a way to start to process and start to address it, even though it's an aspect of yourself that you might not have previously engaged with. And that's why I think, like, I think it's important that we speak about this, but from the side of a person who is in the area or the genre of metal, but also as a person from the outside, because I think there are common threads that I think a lot of people don't actually pick up on or maybe verbalize, that are important to living a holistic life in a world where things can be great and then suddenly become absolutely crazy. And so I just wanted to sort of mention the fact that I can, although I may not necessarily relate to the genre, I can definitely relate to that sort of feeling of being connected to your primal side.
Yeah. I'm just a little bit shocked, Alfie, that you said that you're into aggressive rap. It's definitely not something or a side of you I've seen.
Yeah. The funny thing about it is, like, it's kind of like it's like my me music. Like when I'm in my head and I need to sort of like take a bit of a step away from the world, I kind of like put on the rap, go for a walk, and it's like, I might be walking all normally, and when people are looking at me, it's like, oh, this guy is probably listening to some relaxed stuff. In the meantime, some guy is busy shouting, like the like it's like 100 beats a minute, and yeah, like I think it's interesting because I think I appreciated rap before, but afterwards you're sort of like able to. It becomes less of like a spectator experience and more like a collaborative experience with the music, because it kind of like, it's difficult to explain in words because it's so primal and it's so like emotionally driven. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I hear you. I definitely can also say, Brynn, from what you've shared, it makes the genre a lot more relatable. And, just listening to you, seeing you, meeting you today, you seem like a person who is very comfortable with, how would I say, more serious topics, or you have a darker sense of humor, which is something I really appreciate in people. I really enjoy that personality. And I don't think it comes from nowhere. So I wanted to ask, would you say, delving into metal music and still being in that space, did it teach you or help you deal with more difficult emotions?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if the music itself helped me deal with more difficult emotions, because I think music does have its limitations. It's a sensory experience at the end of the day, and a cerebral one, and it might be something that serves as a catalyst for you to start thinking about certain things. But ultimately, I think, as Alfie mentioned, with the whole thing with trauma, and again, Alfie, I also just wanted to say I'm sorry about your friend.
Thanks.
That's it's very unfortunate. Yeah, loss. I think that's just something as well that does come up, whether people like it or not. You see, that's also what I kind of like about, stuff like horror fiction or movies or whatever it might be. A lot of people go, oh no, that's why would you want to watch that stuff? That's horrible. It's not fun or anything like that. And yes, I understand that, but at the same time, people do need that release. Whether they go to gym or they drink or they listen to, like heavy metal or like up tempo rap or whatever. That's their way of dealing with things. And I think for me, in terms of dealing with more difficult emotions, I think what I find most useful when it comes to emotions, because I know there's a huge amount of discourse around things like mental health, and and it's an important thing, but at the same time, I do feel like that if you tend to meditate or cogitate too much on certain aspects of your personality, or you start to focus on things like I have bipolar, I have clinical depression, I have narcissism. You start to act out that personality. You start to actually look for things that stimulate it, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I don't really like it, because for me, mental health, mental issues, they're very serious. And I do think there are cases where people, I know for a fact there are cases where people have very, very real problems. But at the same time, I think people who, in many ways, the self is a story that you are a story you tell yourself at the end of the day. So whatever you're saying to yourself in your head, in the record player or the tape player in your head, that's going on behind closed doors that no one else hears necessarily. Whatever you're saying to yourself is what you genuinely think about yourself. And most people's self-concept is dismal or non-existent, to say the very least. So when it comes to dealing with sorry, I'm going on. I've sort of gone a bit off on a tangent here, but back to my main point about emotions is a lot of people say all emotions are valid, but I prefer to say that all emotions are invalid. And the reason I like to say that all emotions are invalid is because they don't have a rational base per se. They are generally as a result of external stimuli or even a random thought or a memory. You can wake up and you can remember something that really upset you out of nowhere, and then you feel this like angst and this anger, and you're like, why do I feel this way? This is so random, and you feel awful, and you can't really understand it, and then you feel caustic and violent, and it's terrible. It's a terrible state to be in. I think for human beings, emotions, while they are necessary to our existence, because that is, by definition, what makes us human, they're terrible things. They're absolutely awful. They cause massive problems. People with their egos and the need to be seen and heard and loved and to be good. I need to be good. That's the one that really gets me. So many people are so obsessed about being a good person that they just lose all perspective. They hyper focus on this holiness or this I'm only a good person. There's no part of me that's bad. I'm just the greatest person ever. I'm gonna show you what a great person I am, and that's just ridiculous. Everybody has their darker aspects, and emotions in themselves they're deceptive. They're extremely deceptive, especially when it comes to relationships. And if you can just step back from yourself for a second and go, good God, I'm being an idiot. This is ridiculous. And if you have to give yourself some space and get this stuff out of you, whatever that means, whether you have to go and write it down or shout and scream or whatever it is, I don't know, I do believe there's some sort of aspect of the human psyche where there's a catharsis. There are cathartic rituals that you have to undergo. And I think self-reflection is only as useful as the time you spend on it. You don't want to spend too little time, and you certainly don't want to spend too much time. Now, that's obviously a very abstract and not particularly useful observation, because people go, oh, well, then how do I know, Brynn? I don't know. I can't say that. I can't answer for everybody, but what I can tell you is that probably the best piece of advice I can give you in that regard is from Oscar Wilde, where he says, everything in moderation, including moderation. And that's exactly it. You just have to know your limits. It's okay. Everybody has limits, and if you have limits, that's fine. Yeah. Just know what your limits are and respect them.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's crazy because we had so many topics that we thought we'd cover, and I'm like, I could go on chatting about this for the longest time, and I guess it speaks to how multifaceted you are, because on the one hand you're like a metalhead, and then you kind of step into such cerebral and abstract discussions like this, and I think it's important for a person to kind of be able to explore all of these different sides of ourselves, because otherwise they end up coming out in ways that we don't necessarily expect. But I'm gonna make a little bit of a pivot, because one of the things that I'm really hoping to speak to you about is your other side, the maybe more tech-driven side. And I was hoping that we could specifically, because I think you're in the music space, and then you're also in this sort of like new world that's emerging from a technology standpoint. I'm hoping we can speak about music and the future of what it might look like. But maybe before we step in that direction, I'm hoping that we can maybe just touch a little bit of our bases and maybe kind of like build a little bit of a foundation on some of the concepts of this sort of new thing that's Web3. Like you open any social media site at the moment, you open LinkedIn, you open Facebook, you open pretty much whatever it might be, and there's somebody talking about an NFT, or somebody talking about an Ethereum or a crypto or a crypto kitty or a whatever it might be. And so what I don't want to do is talk about maybe like the individual specific things that are out there that are in the main discussion, and maybe speak about it from the perspective of a person that is in the creative space and has to actually enter this sort of new unknown and this new kind of like landscape that nobody really completely grasps. And maybe you as a person who is in the space can provide us a little bit of value. So one of the places that I'd like us to start the discussion a little bit is on some of the basics. And maybe focusing specifically on the things that actually facilitate cryptocurrency. So speaking a little bit about, one place we will start is blockchain, talking about what a currency versus an NFT is, and smart contracts. And I think this is kind of where my knowledge sort of runs out. So I'll almost let you help guide the conversation. But let's maybe start with sort of what like a blockchain is, and then maybe the difference between like a currency and an NFT. I think that's maybe a good place for us to start. Okay. Yeah.
That sounds good. So you want to know a bit more about crypto basically, and how it all works. And you want me to give you
the very dumb version.
That's okay. Look, when it comes to crypto, it's a lot of it is wild. It's really, really weird stuff. But I think before we really get into the underlying technology and all this cool stuff with NFTs and smart contracts and different methods of consensus, I think the main thing we need to actually look at here is why does cryptocurrency exist? That's the real question. And I don't know how many people are really aware of this. Is at the end of the day, cryptocurrency, and when I say cryptocurrency, I'm talking chiefly about Bitcoin here, was started back in 2008 as an answer to government-issued currencies, otherwise known as fiat currencies. So obviously there's a bunch of fiat currencies in the world. We've got the Rand here, South African Rand. We've got the US dollar, we've got the pound sterling, and so on and so forth, the euro, and pretty much all of that currency that we have is issued by governments, by the Federal Reserve in the United States. They are pretty much who controls the supply of money, and when it comes to the value of money, most of that, we used to have the gold standard where, holding a certain amount of currency or dollars would equal a certain amount of gold. But the problem there is that people decided rather than having dollars, they would rather have the gold. So they started, withdrawing their gold and stuff. And then the US went, hold on a second. Wait, no, we're actually not going to do this anymore. We're not going to have the gold standard anymore. You can't do that. You have to only have currency. You can only have the dollars. So pretty much, really currency, when it comes down to it, is at its root, you could say it's just paper, which is okay. It's an oversimplification, to say the very least. But basically, when it comes to currency, people only believe that money has power, and pretty much everybody has a perception of the US dollar. They have a perception of the Rand, and pretty much all of our understanding of value comes from everybody's understanding their level of faith within a particular currency, and obviously the underlying assets and the skills, the people, and whatever the potential that underpins it. So, you know, the rand has a particular value in relation to other currencies because we have certain aspects of this country that are very, very strong, where people like to invest and where there's still structure, there's infrastructure, there's growth. And then there's obviously other aspects like, say, corruption, a failing power grid, issues with our government, etc., that undermine the value of that currency. And the same goes for other countries around the world. So the problem here, though, is that money is controlled by governments. And that's a big problem because it basically means that all of your savings, everything is the value of that is determined by a centralized body, a very few people in the world. And really what happens in reality is if you don't have money, you have to go and, you know, apply for UIF, or you'll have to get a loan, or, you know, take an IOU or something like that. Too bad for you. But if governments run out of money and they can't borrow, for example, they'll print money. That's what happens. So what happens is when you print money, it leads to inflation. And pretty much what that means is that the value of the spending power of 1 unit of currency, 1 rand, $1, starts to sink. Okay. So essentially what happens is when the Federal Reserve starts to print money, because they're running out of cash, they are diminishing the value of the dollar per se, the spending power and people's savings and their retirement annuities and that kind of stuff. And just to give you some perspective in terms of, I think it's America's foreign debt, which was up until recently $29 trillion. They just added, I think in the last 2 weeks of December, they added $600 billion to their national debt.
Wow. That's
a huge amount of money. Yeah. Can you imagine telling somebody that you'd racked up $600 billion in debt in 2 weeks? They'd just be like, "What are you even saying, bro? What did you do?
Exactly.
What have you done?" It's ungodly. We're talking about ungodly amounts of money. I think half of all dollars in circulation currently were printed in 2020. I might be paraphrasing that, or I might not be getting the amount exactly right. But that's just to give you an idea. That means all dollars that are currently in existence or have existed since the beginning of the dollar. Pretty much those were printed in the last 2 years, half of them.
That's crazy.
So, and in terms of the spending power of the dollar, I think by 2030 it's projected to halve.
Wow.
So whatever you can buy for now for $1, it's going to cost you $2 by 2030, relatively speaking. So that essentially the cost of living is going to double. For the vast majority of people, relatively speaking. So it's a big problem. Fiat currencies are a massive issue. In 2007, 2008, we had the world economic recession, and that was disastrous. And what generally happened there is that a whole lot of billionaires made a lot of money, a lot of wealth was transferred, and a lot of people lost their jobs and their livelihoods and their quality of life. Similarly, during the COVID-19 pandemic, billionaires and Amazon made a whole stack of money, and SMEs, small businesses, whatever, they lost out big time. So what we've really seen with capitalism as an ideology and democracy as a method of ruling is pretty much the transfer of wealth from the many to the few on a prodigious scale. And essentially what the reason for Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, at least philosophically speaking, is to counter that and to pretty much bring value back to people, because basically it has a finite supply and it's programmable money. And what you're really seeing here in the modern era is the separation of money and state. That's really what it is. So as we had the separation of church and state back in the day, now you're seeing it with money, because essentially the idea is that the supply of money and the way money functions shouldn't be centralized within the hands of a few people. It needs to be distributed across the board, and it has to be more democratic in that respect, or at least meritocratic. And that's pretty much the reason why cryptocurrencies exist. And then as for the underlying technology like blockchain, all a blockchain really is an immutable ledger. So pretty much it's something that records transactions, and it's something that you can't fundamentally change. It exists, and it doesn't exist on any centralized server. It's something that you can that pretty much it exists across the board. You cannot go and change the blockchain. You can't go and alter the transactions. You can't change the information. So everything is recorded, and everybody, it's complete visibility. So you can't so if you want to engage in something like money laundering, or if you want to engage in corrupt practices and stuff, wherever you send money, it'll be sent to an address, and you can see where it is, and you can see where it's coming out and who's using it. And that's the idea, is that it also provides transparency to transactions. And as we know, a lot of the time what happens with money, it got lost. That R1 billion for that we were supposed to use to build schools. We just lost it. Yeah, it's like, okay, that's fair enough. It's like like 20 rand slipped out of your wallet or something. You don't just lose
money,
a billion rand. I mean, you don't lose that amount of money. It goes somewhere. It goes somewhere very specific. Generally speaking, into the back pockets of people who are just pretty much scum. And I mean, even with a couple of years ago, I think Cyril Ramaphosa stood on TV and said something to the effect of, in straight faced, without missing a beat, that we've lost R1 trillion to corruption. And to give you some perspective, that's 1 with 12 zeros.
Jeez, like
rands, 1,000 billion rand, or a million rand, whatever it is. It's an insane amount of money. It's an ungodly amount of money, but that's over a certain period of time, obviously. But still, that's what happens when you trust a few people with money. It just disappears. So if you're looking at things like in this country, like inequality, the drop in standards in education, employment opportunities for young people. I think 50% of young people in this country are unemployed. And if you'd been promised a whole lot of things over the years, free education, jobs, all that kind of stuff, I would be angry as hell if I were those young people, because they've been lied to and disenfranchised in a way that is unforgivable. And this is just the problem, is that we can't, as much as it's democracy is a nice idea. It hasn't really worked. It hasn't worked as a whole across the board. It's not just a thing with this country. It's across the board. So we really do have to fundamentally re-examine the way we do business, how we engage in work. We live in a globalized world. That's it. I speak to people. I mean, even now, I'm talking to you guys. I'm in Durban. You guys are all, I'm assuming, in Cape Town. But you're in another part of the country, and then I can talk to people in the States or in Korea, and we can actually do work together. We can do things together. We live in a digital age, and there's this whole growing economy that's flourishing. It's absolutely flourishing, and it's not to say that there isn't a whole bunch of rubbish as well. You're never just going to just get rid of a whole lot of the troubles like this. It's not like crypto is a magical means of just making money and suddenly being free of all those problems. There's lots of problems surrounding crypto as well, and there's a lot of crypto that I don't necessarily like or I don't necessarily support. It's just, that's my personal preference. I don't buy stuff that doesn't do stuff. You won't go and buy an inferior currency. You're not going to go and buy something that's worth nothing, or that doesn't have something that fundamentally underpins it. So basically, when it comes to crypto, it's a vast world. But basically, blockchain is pretty much what underpins it, and it's that visibility, that transparency, and also just the ability to not have to worry about, I need to send money to my friend in Japan. Oh, but I can't do that because, like I've got rands and then I have to do the exchange and it's not really, or if I want to do like a remittance, it's going to take a couple of days and it's got to go through, it's not practical. I mean, it's like with crypto, I can send money to you right now. I don't no bank charges, no nothing. I can go and send you. I can say, what's your wallet address? Bing bang boom,
and it's sent.
And there's your crypto.
Yeah. So
done
so
in seconds.
I think that's very good. And I think I'm glad that you kind of took the reins on the direction with the conversation and focused on the why with cryptocurrency first, because I think that's actually maybe the more important answer than necessarily the technology behind blockchain, because all of those things will become common knowledge eventually in the future. But one of the things that I was hoping that we could focus on is the practical aspect of what that landscape actually looks like, because you're in the space, and one of the things that you mentioned is that one of the areas that it's almost revolutionizing is, and not just it, like I guess technological advances in general, is the way that we work, and I'm hoping that we can explore that, and specifically in terms of the creative space, because there is a lot of buzz going on, and there's been a lot of chatter about Bitcoins and currency, and you've kind of laid the foundation about why crypto as a whole concept is valuable, like this sort of idea of the decentralization of the currency or of the value. But I almost want to now start to ground that in actual practicality and creative projects. And maybe from that perspective, a good place to start is around NFTs, because that seems to be the one thing that gets spoken about in conjunction with the creative, different creative pursuits. So maybe a place to start that's sort of kind of basic is like, what you've spoken about the currency aspect of crypto. What is this sort of like NFT term that's kind of used a lot, or what's its relevance to that conversation?
Well, if you're talking about NFTs, which are basically non-fungible tokens, that's pretty much something that exists on a blockchain. It's a token. So when we say non-fungible, it's not. So if you want to go and spend $100 right now, 100 Rand, you want to go down to your local, supermarket, or you go to whatever the diner, the cafe around the corner, and you want to get something to eat for lunch. You can go and transfer that cash right now. You can exchange it for real goods, for a product. It's fungible. It's something that you can use. A non-fungible token is something that pretty much you can't give somebody a non-fungible token and then they go, okay, cool, I'm going to give you like a new car per se. That's generally the idea, is that it's not directly exchangeable for any kind of currency or item per se, like product. So pretty much when we're talking about NFTs, an NFT it can be anything from an image to a video to a piece of music. It's pretty much anything that lives on a blockchain, but it has it's a type of media, or it's a type of token, and it has a given value, because pretty much how it works with anything. Again, why does Bitcoin have value? Because people give it value. Why does an NFT have value? Because people give it value. They work together. They create some kind of underlying value that exists there. So for a lot of NFTs, it's a very weird space, because trying to explain this even in a relatively short conversation, it's not that easy. But pretty much when it comes down to what you really see, the majority of in the NFT space is all these profile pic projects, where pretty much your biggest ones will be like your Bored Ape Yacht Club, your Lazy Lions, your Cool Cats, all that kind of stuff. And pretty much what we're really looking at here is it's a lot of people think that when it comes to NFTs, it's just, okay, well, you make silly JPEGs and then you make money. It's an oversimplification. That's the simple truth of it. If you want to create NFTs, you do have to actually have some knowledge of programming. You have to have some idea on how to develop things. It's programmable art, really, when we're talking about profile pic projects. And people will buy into these projects much the same as they would buy into a crypto per se. Most of them will consider it a financial vehicle or a vehicle for investment. A lot of these projects will tell you that's not the case. Really, what you're buying, in a sense, when you're buying an NFT is a kind of exclusive membership, or you have access to an exclusive item that others may or may not have access to, or there's a limited number of those items. That's the idea. So it's pretty much the idea with projects is that you'll get a first run of a project, like it could be 200 unique NFTs, and if you buy into that, you're one of the only holders. And maybe it all depends on how these different projects work differently. So you might be able to buy one NFT on one project, you might be capped at 10 on another. It all depends on really the creators and the teams behind these things. So really, at the end of the day, do all NFTs have value? No. Will some of them be worth a lot? Yes, because they have cultural significance, they have historical significance, and they also allow people to participate in microeconomies which I think is probably the most exciting aspect of NFTs, because of that gate. It's a gateway. Yeah. So, what you also see with entertainment, with art, that kind of stuff, is that if you want to access something, you can't just go and have your idea, or let's just say a studio will decide what they're going to do with certain content, what kind of stuff they're going to put out. If Marvel wants to do a new movie and they want to use these characters and these actors, that's how it's going to be. You don't really get a say in that. I suppose you could make a stink on social media and stuff like that, and maybe people will respond, but there's no guarantee on that. Whereas with NFT projects, like your profile picture projects and that kind of stuff, the idea here is that you can actually develop microeconomies, and you can develop some kind of culture and some kind of greater experience for people that some people will basically have exclusive membership to, and others will potentially be able to enjoy it outside of that, and then potentially join in it on different ways. So really what you're starting to see is the evolution of the creator economy as well. And you're also starting to see, for artists and creators and musicians, the ability to now change their revenue models.
So
by utilizing
So Brynn, what exactly does this mean for the everyday creative? Because I understand the concept that, NFTs, it's in the digital space. So immediately you would think this will be very useful for any digital creator, people making digital art. But if we think about other types of creatives, such as yourself, musicians, or fine artists who maybe do more tangible mediums, I think I've seen an article, one of the British museums selling some NFT digital copies of real old previous artworks, which is quite interesting. But from your perspective, what is the so what? How can any creative make use of this new technology? Should we?
Well, that's obviously up for debate, really. And I would also argue that where we are at in terms of the technology is still relatively it's relatively new. It's only been around for a little while. And I do think there are some problems with existing models. That's a given. There's been problems with exploits. There's projects that rug pull, which basically means the creators just take all the money and run. Yeah, there's a huge amount of risk in the space. If you're going, the real thing here is that if you're going into any project and you're wanting to turn a profit, whether it's cryptocurrencies or it's NFTs, you accept the risk. It's as simple as that. You can't plead ignorance. Part of an unregulated space is that, yes, there's the potential to win big time. You could win it. You could win big. Maybe and that's the thing is you can own an NFT that's worth X number of dollars. It could be thousands of dollars, millions of dollars. But the question there is, will somebody else, because it's a non-fungible token, I can't just take that token, put it into a machine, and it goes, here's all your Ethereum, here's all your dollars. It's non-fungible. I can't just go and change it directly for cash. Okay? I have to sell that to somebody else. Somebody else has to agree and say, ooh, your NFT, Bored Ape number 731, or whatever number it is worth this amount of money. I want it. That's the idea. So in many ways, what you're seeing is that with digital art, it's now mimicking or kind of like the continuation of what happens in the world of fine art. And it's a very strange space when it comes to art and when it comes to media. I think it's a very interesting space. Obviously, having been involved in it for years, people's perceptions of it, and again, this is why it's so contentious. Is that some people will look at something like a profile picture project, like whatever, like Cool Cats or something, and some of them will go, "Wow, this is absolutely revolutionary. It's historically." It's like one of a kind. This is something that's going to do really well, and maybe it does. Another person might say, "I don't see the value in it. I don't fundamentally get it." And that's the same thing. You'll see those same attitudes reflected in art galleries when people look at pieces of fine art, for example. Some people just won't connect with the art. They don't really resonate. It doesn't resonate with them. So really, if you're going into any NFT project with the view to make heaps and heaps of cash, I don't think you're really doing it you're not really getting into it for the right reasons. If you happen to benefit financially as a result of that, good for you. And if somebody does believe that whatever you hold has X amount of value and is prepared to pay for it, that's also, they do that of their own volition. Nobody's holding a gun to their head and saying, "You're going to buy this NFT, or that's the end of it for you." So it's like everything here is voluntary. Yeah. So it's kind of like the Wild West. And also I would also say that if you look at modern economics as a whole, and you try and make sense of it, you're going about it all wrong. You really are. Modern economics, the modern condition is absolutely absurd. And just as I embrace the absurdity of, say, death metal and whatever, I also like to embrace the inherent absurdity of the human condition and human existence. And all of this stuff, from fiat currency to NFTs is part of that absurdity. And if you're trying to look for rationality and logic in places it doesn't exist, then you're going to come up pretty short, and you're not going to understand it. And the fact of the matter is that if you're looking at things from a logical perspective, you're just putting yourself at a deficit. You're putting yourself down. So a lot of the stuff really just comes down to perception, and ultimately, it's not to say that there isn't value. What that exact dollar value is, I'm not going to say to you that NFT project X has this value and that you should pay this amount for this NFT. That's a gamble you take. That's a bet you take. Maybe you come up and you come off smelling like roses. Maybe you make a terrible investment and you lose everything. That is part of the risk you take. It's not like everybody just wins. I've lost money in crypto. It's not all been sunshine and roses for me. Where it's like I didn't know stuff in the beginning. I bought something going like, okay, I think it's gonna. I didn't fundamentally understand what it does. I had no idea. I was gambling. That's what I was doing. So when you buy into stuff, yes, and even then, even with the safest bets and everything on paper looks great, and you look at it and you go, the fundamentals are fantastic, and there's no way this can fail. They say the same thing about the Titanic. That's the thing. Could the world economy go to pieces tomorrow? It very well could. The human systems, regardless of whether they're digital or not, they could very well carry on for ages, or they could collapse in an instant. That's just part of the whole deal for me. But really with NFTs, the cool thing is that for creators, they have the ability to tap into this new technology, this emerging technology, and if they get the formula right, and they're prepared to invest their time and their expertise, and it is a tremendous amount of time. Don't get me wrong. Top projects, the guys work very hard. You can do very well, and if you keep your community in focus, I do believe, I genuinely believe you can create something absolutely incredible. I do believe that.
Okay, so I like that, because this is like a good place to kind of take the next step in the discussion, because we've spoken about blockchain at its philosophical level. We've spoken a little bit about the technology, and then we've spoken about NFTs and their almost abstract implications for the creative landscape. But I want to kind of like now almost root things in practicality, and how I'm hoping that we do that is speaking about a creative field as it exists now, and then maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the opportunities that NFTs could introduce in the future. So right now we're almost taking a little bit of like a speculative lens about the implementations of it once it's sort of like stabilized and all of that, but to give the typical person an idea of how it could affect their industry or their profession. So because I think one of the creative spaces that isn't sort of existing in a corporate, or one that's usually focused around the creator, that I've experienced as well is music. Because for about 2.5 years, I was in the same building as a group of music producers. So I've got a reasonable idea of what the process looks like, both from a creative perspective and from like how an artist actually makes money. So what I'm going to try and do is maybe very briefly talk about the different steps that that a musician goes through in terms of making a piece of work and making money off of it. And then we can maybe try and see if we can identify areas where NFTs can actually provide value, both specifically to the artist, because the hope is that we're speaking to creatives, but maybe even for the community of that specific artist. So, I mean, as it stands, the way that we experience music is through our platforms and like Spotify and all of that. But basically, you have your artist who works with a producer, works with a band, however it might be. I guess my knowledge is more of rap, so I'm not really that familiar with the sort of instrument-focused genres. But you essentially have a group of musicians who they essentially put the initial investment into the piece of work. This is before they've been signed to a label or whatever it might be, right? They put together this music, and they either through a distribution service or through the current technologies that are available now, put it on specific streaming sites, be it Spotify, Apple Music. Some go to free platforms like SoundCloud and whatever it might be. And especially, I would say in the hip hop scene, the hope is that you will kind of get noticed by some or other label or organization in the music space that'll pick you up. And then generally you kind of sign some kind of contract where they give you an advance of money, and that's what you use to kind of build your career, because it gives you then the money to hire new producers, shoot the music videos, hire the videographers, do all of these things to kind of get to almost like a high scale level of production, and you kind of hopefully kick your career off from that perspective. And from the label side, what they do is by giving you that money upfront and letting you produce the music, what they do is they invest in your future, from the sense of the sales that you make from that high quality work. They essentially take a cut, or sometimes in some bad contracts, even all of that, and they essentially have a higher stake and control in your production. So essentially, the record labels invest in the artist the same way an individual might invest in a business. And so let's maybe now then roll that process back and talk about how these sort of technologies can influence that creative process and kind of maybe either help the artist, the label, or the audience specifically. I don't know if you think that's something we can do.
Yeah, that's absolutely something we can do. Like when it comes to music and NFTs, I think this is still a largely unexplored area. Most of the focus has been on, like I talked extensively about PFP NFTs, like profile pictures and stuff, but there's also gaming NFTs, which I do think actually is also something to consider, just in-game items and owning those items, trading them, that kind of stuff. So basically where you have digital economies that where you have actual items created by people or found or discovered or whatever it might be, that you can then use in-game to increase your status or increase your overall capital or your equity. That's an interesting space as well. But when we're talking about music, I don't think that it's necessarily music NFTs is a very interesting one. I think that who is the artist now? I can't think of their name now. It's completely flown out of my mind. But basically, they released one of their albums. I think they were the first band to release an album as an NFT, which is a pretty big deal. It's Kings of Leon.
Okay.
That's it. It was Kings of Leon. They released the world's. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, again, don't take my word for it. Do your research and all that stuff. But as far as I know, they were the first band to release their album as an NFT. I know that there was also. I know that John Legend is busy working on an NFT music platform. I think it's called Your Song, which is quite a big one. So I think he's a co-founder or co-investor in that. And then pretty much what happens is you'll get different producers or artists who can then upload vibes, which are basically the names of the NFTs, and then they can use that, they can sell that, resell that, they can create value out of that in whatever way they see fit. Whereas if they're helping other artists, if they're catering to existing bands or producers, so there's that. I also know there was there's another DJ named Blau who released a whole bunch of NFTs and made quite a lot of money off of that, from what I understand. So I think really when it comes to NFTs, the concept of releasing your album or your music as an NFT is a pretty interesting one, and I do think that there's value there because, again, when it comes to digital art and digital material, I don't really think that when it comes to, if we look at the album I produced and released in 2020 with my band, we released that on Bandcamp pretty much as high quality audio, and then we have our music videos. But if we had actually had something that kind of made that experience a little bit more special or a bit different, or it had some kind of niche added value to it, where a few people would gain access to it, and only those people. So they would be the exclusive holders of that particular iteration of our album or whatever it might be, where it might have bonus tracks or extra footage, or it might have some kind of interactive, I don't know, technology thrown on top of that. That would be very interesting, because then you're also able to cater to particular music fans who have particular tastes and who want to have exclusive access to particular types of material. So the nice thing with NFTs for artists is that it gives them the chance to create digital properties and digital pieces of art with their music or along with their music that pretty much gives them the capacity to have super fans and to also earn a living in a more sustainable way from a few people rather than a whole bunch of people just listening to it on stream or something like that. So I think fundamentally it's a very, very interesting concept. I think that there'll be different approaches to it, and I still think it's something that's really not particularly well defined at this point. But I think once the right formulas start being found, and the right audiences get reached, I think you'll start to see some very interesting developments in how music changes as well. Because even then, it's like music videos and music, is that the be all and end all of it for people, or does it give what is holding a particular item or an NFT or the album? What does it give you access to? Oh, okay. Well, if you buy this NFT, then the next album release you'll get it before everyone else, regardless of whether and you'll get it for free or you'll get it at 50% off, regardless of whether you do X or Y. So you can also define the parameters of your relationship with your community, and you can have more interaction with them, and you can create a sustainable model where there's this long-term flow and there's this expectation that, okay, well, there's more of this is going to come, and this is the kind of stuff I can expect to see from this artist. So I think that it's going to fundamentally change the way that people approach music and how they create their media, and I think it's going to bring some different talents together as well. And it might be visual artists, it might be film producers. Who knows, really? I think you're going to see some very interesting and cool stuff coming out of this, and you might even find that entire communities start to form around musicians and just all the different things that content creators can create and bring to the table as well. I just think really what NFTs represent more than anything else is the birth of the digital microeconomy and the proliferation of that. such that people from across the world with similar interests, they're no longer geographic differences, currency differences, all of that stuff, cultural differences are no longer an issue because you're now able to get together with people from all these disparate places. You have common interests and you want to build something and you contribute towards it. And again, if you just get the formula right, and I think that all the different pieces fall into place, you'll start to see some really, really interesting developments in the visual art space, in gaming, and definitely in music as well. So that's pretty much the way I see it. Yeah. Again, it is speculative, but I think it's an inevitability at this point because existing models. I mean, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the way things have gone for artists, a lot of them can't really make a living off of live music. With venues, and I also think streaming services are not particularly profitable for them either. It's like you can get, you can be on Spotify, but are you going to make any money from that? Are you going to get the visibility you need? Whereas if you can position yourself in a niche community, or you can appeal to people on a different platform that are looking for X, and you bring the right product, you can get some really cool stuff going. And then again, you can develop your community and actually have an ongoing relationship with that community where they become involved and they can even have a say in how things turn out over time, or what kind of stuff would they want your music to be more avant-garde? Would they want it to be more industrial? Do they want it to be more pop driven? They can have their say, and it's like, we would like the next album to be kind of like this album, or we want it to be more like this, or we want you to experiment and like do something completely off the wall. It's very interesting because it also allows artists to plan their media better. And I think at the end of the day, produce a better quality product for an audience that wants it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's very cool. I think in my very, very, very limited knowledge of the space, I think one of the areas that I'm excited about specifically for music is that idea of the microeconomy around the artist. Just because having kind of been closer to that space and being a fan of a lot of like hip hop music, one of the things I guess I see pretty often is the fact that a lot of people sort of try to use that as a way out of their financial situation, and kind of like as a way of getting out of poverty, and then they essentially get into a bad contract, and then it's kind of like just issues and on issues on issues on issues. And that idea of a micro economy with your super fans kind of cuts out all of that noise. Once obviously, again, we're still at a speculative point in the journey of this kind of technology, but I'm excited for that to become in reality, because I mean, when I think about it, some of the artists I like, I'm like, if I could contribute to your journey and I knew it was going directly to you rather than into somebody's pocket, that might be something that I'm willing to do. And I mean, that use case has already been proven with all of these crowdsourcing platforms, and it's existed in different fields. And I guess maybe NFTs are just a way to kind of even cut out the fiat currency over and above all of the other middlemen in the situation. So I guess that for me is what I'm excited to kind of like see the development of.
Brynn,
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it is a developing space. That's the amazing thing about it, is that it's all it's all super modern, and I think that just the rate at which things are evolving is incredible, and just to see how this is emerging in real time has been incredible, really, just to be there firsthand and to see it happening. Because I mean, we're still at the beginning of the journey in many respects, and again, what's also really exciting about all this is that it is developing the underlying technology for these things. It's forcing people to think in different ways, and I like that a lot, because it's like we kind of going, this way doesn't work. We need to develop our creator economies, and we need to make sure that creatives and people are benefiting such that they can continue to do what they love And if they're talented and they're innovative and ambitious, they should be rewarded for what they do. And that even again, just building on the relationship between the end user and the creator is so important, because so much of the time you'll find that your favorite TV series gets cancelled, or you'll go and watch a movie and it stinks. And you're like, why would you even use these people? Why would you have these actors? And studios can't just go and like cut it to shreds and edit it and edit out all the cool stuff or whatever, and then it only comes out in the director's cut, and even then it might be quite bad. So for me, it's like, just in terms of actually, I mean, that's a lot of fan-made movies and crowdfunded content is really, really cool. And I think if you can develop that a little bit more and you can really hone it, you'll see some insanely cool stuff coming out, and that's going to be wild. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait for that.
I'm curious, you were talking about the music landscape within NFTs. Are you planning to, or have you already started dabbling as a musician yourself in that space? It's definitely something I'm thinking about more and more, because I'm always, I'm a big fan of technology for the most part when it comes to creating stuff and reaching new audiences. I mean, even for me, just Spotify and Bandcamp was like, wow, that's so far out. Like when someone from Poland will be like, I love your music, please can you send me a physical copy? And like, how did this guy find us? It's like, Brynn, we're all over the internet. It's like, no, but that's like, can you imagine, like, out of all of the potential people, he found us somehow. It's amazing. And I just think that's wild. And I'm just that's why this idea of NFTs and stuff is like, wow, imagine that. Like I might be the first South African metal musician to produce an album that's an NFT or a music video or something like that, or a live performance. And I'm just like, that's pretty wild. That's pretty cool. So it might not be walking on Mars, but it's pretty damn close. So yeah, I think there's definitely scope for it in the future. And I mean, I'm just so deep into the space as well. I just find it fascinating, and I've just found so many really interesting creatives with amazing ideas, and just all the conversations you get between people from different walks of life and different places. It's just it's surreal. It's really surreal, but it's and you also just find that a lot of people are they're just trying their best, and they're just trying to find new ways to reach out and to create value. And I think that's exactly what we need right now, especially with the way the world's going with wars and pandemics and all that scary, crazy stuff. It's nice to have some sense of stability and community, and it's also, I like the human aspect of this stuff. I just think that for me, like just all the really interesting people, even this conversation, it's just amazing to me that I'm like, wow, there's people who. They have podcasts, and they make art, and they have interests, and they have music, and like, I can't listen to all this stuff, and I can't check out all this stuff, but I want to so badly. And I'm like, it's just unbelievable how many people there are, and just how seemingly unlimited human creativity and expression is. It's absolutely mind blowing. It's just like crazy stuff.
No, definitely. Look, we've been going for almost 90 minutes. Like it's been a good one. I think I could definitely go on for a long time. I think I especially enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about metal as a genre from a person who's kind of like in that space. But I think all in all, this has been a great conversation. But I think we do need to let our audience take a little bit of a rest from our rambling, because I think we could go on forever. But Brynn, we really appreciate your time. It's really been great having you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Brynn. It was a really great conversation. I think it's nice that we somehow tied the NFTs back to music as we started with it, because it's an interesting space, but for creatives to also hear how the new emerging technologies can also influence their industry, I think that's important.
Definitely, and I think everyone should be embracing this kind of stuff. I don't really want to see South Africans getting left out of the loop.
Sure.
on
For
something
sure.
else again. And we've got a lot of great talent in this country, and it also deserves to be internationally recognized and rewarded. And it 100% is a reality, I assure you.
And then one last question before we say goodbye. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. It's Van Bronheim1, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, you can just check out Imperious Vision and Sorgsicken on YouTube. You can check us on Bandcamp, Spotify, all the usual places. But yeah, feel free to hit me up or just check out the music. Tell me if it's good or not. If you hate it, if you love it. It's all welcome. All the feedback is welcome, and just appreciate you checking it out either way.
Amazing. I think Alfie and I are gonna go get some metal music on our Spotify libraries. I'm excited.
It will be the first.
Awesome. I do hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy it, or at least it makes some sense to you after what I've said.
100%. I'm actually excited.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. And thank you so much to everybody listening. Until next time, have a good one.
Thanks so much, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Cheers.